November 1908. 6 of us were sent into the hills of Romania to check on a village that had stopped answering letters and tax notices. We carried rifles, rations, and the expectation of sick peasants or a blocked road. But the cart on the trail had been abandoned. No smoke rose from the valley. The village watched us without showing faces. Then a barefoot boy stepped forward and told us the dead had been locked inside the church. And at night, they began to move. So before we continue, please make sure to leave a like for late mysteries and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. The order came down to our barracks in Baku in the first week of November 1908. I had been in the army 3 years and had learned that most messages had a reason behind them, even when they were written in careful, clean words. This one was short and uneasy. A village in the hills had missed its tax collection date, missed the church register pickup, and missed 2 scheduled deliveries. A postal runner had turned back after seeing the road blocked by a fallen cart and no one coming out to clear it. A priest from the next parish rode there, found the church locked, and returned without going inside any home. He reported a smell near the well and said he heard movement behind a shutter. The prefect wanted it checked before rumors reached the markets. We were 6, Lieutenant Morosin, Sergeant Petrescu, myself, and 3 privates, Toma, Iancu, and a medic named Dumitru, who had been attached to our unit for influenza season. The lieutenant was young, clean-shaven, and eager to show he could handle a problem without asking for more men. Petrescu was older and carried his experience in his shoulders. Toma was quiet and steady with a rifle. Iancu had joined in the spring and still watched everything with open interest. Dumitru did not talk much, but he looked closely at faces and hands and kept his satchel packed in the same order every time. We left before dawn on a gray morning, each of us with a rifle, a full pouch of cartridges, and a day's rations. We had 2 horses and a cart with blankets, lanterns, extra oil, and a small shovel. The air held a wet cold that made the leather straps stiff. The road out of town was rutted and lined with bare trees. Beyond the last houses, the fields were empty except for stubble and a few crows that lifted in short hops when we passed. The lieutenant rode at the front with Petrescu walking beside the cart. I walked on the left side where I could see the ditches. The 2 horses pulled in a slow, even rhythm. Iancu kept moving between the cart and the rear, trying to keep warm. Toma stayed back with Dumitru and watched our trail. After an hour, the sun rose but gave no heat. We reached a fork with a broken signpost, and the lieutenant checked the paper again. Valea Seca, he said. 2 more hours by road, then the track. Petrescu spat into the mud and wiped his mouth. The track will be worse. We moved into higher ground where the road narrowed and the trees thickened. The cart wheels sank deeper. When the horses pulled, the harness creaked and the wheels made a wet, sucking sound. We passed a small shrine at the side of the road, a wooden box with a painted icon behind cloudy glass. The paint was fresh enough that the face still looked clear. Someone had left a bunch of dried herbs tied with string. Iancu touched his cap and kept walking. My grandmother used to leave those on the road, he said, to keep sickness away. Dumitru glanced at him. Herbs do not stop influenza. They stop fear, Iancu said, then looked embarrassed and fell silent. We ate a piece of bread while walking. I tried to focus on normal details, the weight of the rifle, the damp seam of my boot rubbing my heel, the smell of horse sweat. It helped. If you let your mind run ahead, you started seeing trouble in every shadow. Near midday, we met the first sign that the village had not been living normally. A wagon stood half off the road, one wheel broken, the shaft sunk into the ditch. It was the cart the postal runner had described. It was loaded with sacks of grain, damp from rain. The sacks had been slit, Grain had spilled into the mud and been stamped flat. No one had tried to save it. The lieutenant dismounted and walked around it. Petrescu crouched near the ditch and examined the mud. "What do you see?" the lieutenant asked. "Tracks," Petrescu said. "Many, old ones and newer ones. People went back and forth. No horse, boots mostly. Some bare feet." "Bare feet," I said. Petrescu nodded without looking up. "Children, maybe, or people who did not bother with shoes." Toma pointed with his rifle barrel toward the trees. "No birds," he said. I listened. In the lower country, we had heard crows and small finches. Here, there was only wind through branches and the slow breathing of the horses. The lieutenant straightened. "We keep moving," he said. "No one is hiding a broken wheel from us. We need answers." We pushed the cart past the wagon. The road turned into a track that climbed between firs. The ground changed from mud to wet leaves and stones. The horses struggled and their flanks trembled. Petrescu and I put our shoulders behind the cart to keep it from sliding back. The lieutenant walked ahead, stepping carefully, not wanting to show fatigue. As we climbed, the air became sharper. A thin mist moved through the trees, enough to blur distance. My breath came out in short clouds. Iancu's lips had turned pale, and he rubbed his hands hard, then flexed his fingers around his rifle stock. After another hour, we found the second sign. A dog lay beside the track, ribs showing under its coat. At first I thought it was sleeping, but the legs were stiff. Dumitru knelt, opened the dog's mouth, and looked at the gums. He pulled back the fur at the neck. "What is it?" I asked. Dumitru stood and wiped his fingers on a rag. "Not wolves, no tearing, no bite marks. It died without struggle." "That does not make sense," Iancu said, his voice low. Petrescu glanced around the trees. "Keep your mouths closed," he said. "No one needs panic." The lieutenant looked at Dumitru. "Poison?" "Possible," Dumitru said. "Or sickness. It could be hunger, but it looks recent." The lieutenant's jaw tightened. "Then the village may have influenza. Or something worse. We do not enter houses without care. Dumitru, you will stay back and tell us if we touch anything we should not." Dumitru nodded once, then adjusted the strap of his satchel. We continued, and the trees opened into a shallow valley. Smoke should have been visible even from a distance. It was the season when people burned wood all day. There was none. We saw roofs first, then walls, then the line of a fence. The village sat low, clustered around a small church with a short bell tower. The fields around it were unworked. A few thin cattle stood near a shed and did not lift their heads when we approached. The lieutenant raised his hand and we stopped behind the last line of trees. He looked through binoculars, then handed them to Petrescu. Petrescu took a long look and lowered them slowly. "No people," Petrescu said. "No movement." Toma shifted his feet. "There is movement," he said. We all watched. One of the house shutters moved inward, then outward, as if pressed from behind. It happened once, then stopped. The lieutenant spoke quietly. "We go in together. No one breaks formation. No shots unless ordered." I felt my mouth go dry. I tried to think of simple reasons: sickness, fear of outsiders, a family hiding. Then I remembered the priest's report, the smell at the well, and the dog that died without struggle. We stepped out of the trees and started down the slope toward the first fence, and the cattle turned their heads at the same time to stare at us. The fence gate was closed with a strip of rope, not a lock. Petrescu cut it with his knife and swung the gate inward. The hinge made a thin squeal that carried too far in the quiet. The cattle kept staring. One of them chewed slowly, and a strand of grass hung from its mouth. We entered the first lane between houses. The ground was packed earth with a thin layer of wet leaves. Several doorways were open, but the doors stood still, not moving with the wind. A wooden bucket lay on its side near a step, empty. A broom leaned against a wall. It looked like someone had set things down and never returned. The lieutenant stopped beside the nearest house and called out in a firm voice, "Army, we are here by order of the prefect. Come out and speak with us." No answer. I heard only our breathing and the horses shifting behind us. He tried again, louder. "Open your doors. If you are sick, we have a medic. If you have trouble, we can help." Still nothing. Iancu leaned toward me and whispered, "Maybe they all went into the forest." "Quiet," Petrescu said without turning his head. The lieutenant motioned to Toma. Toma stepped forward and knocked on the open doorframe with the side of his fist. The sound was dull. He waited, then knocked again. A child's voice came from inside, thin and rough. "Go away." The lieutenant held his posture steady. "We will not harm you. Are you alone?" Silence. Then the same voice closer to the doorway. "Go away." Dumitru stepped forward a half-pace. "I am a medic," he said. "If you are sick, I can help. Tell me what is wrong." A shadow moved at the back of the room. Then the voice spoke again, lower. "They will hear." The lieutenant looked at Petrescu, then back at the doorway. "Who will hear?" No reply. A soft scrape came from inside, like bare feet on wood. Then it stopped. The lieutenant made a decision quickly. "We don't force it," he said. "We secure the church and the well. Then we gather anyone willing to speak." We moved toward the center of the village. As we walked, more shutters shifted. Not many, just enough to tell me we were being watched. No faces appeared, no coughs, no crying. The village felt held in a tight hand. Near the church, the lane opened into a small square. A stone well stood there with a wooden cover set partly aside. A rope and bucket hung from a beam. The smell was stronger here. It was not the smell of animals or manure. It was sweet and sour and made my stomach tighten. Dumitru approached first and stopped short. He covered his mouth with a cloth from his satchel and waved us back with his free hand. "Don't crowd," he said. "Stay upwind." The lieutenant took a step closer but kept his distance. "What is it?" Dumitru pointed. The bucket on the rope was wet, and the stone lip of the well had streaks down it as if water had spilled and run. A dark stain marked the ground near the base. Petrescu crouched, held his breath, and looked at the stain without touching. "Blood?" he asked. Dumitru shook his head once. "Not fresh. Could be. Could be something else. The smell is coming from down there." Toma lifted his rifle slightly, eyes on the nearby houses. "Someone used this recently," he said. The lieutenant looked toward the church doors. They were shut. A small padlock hung from the latch, new and bright against old wood. "Why lock the church?" Iancu asked before he could stop himself. Petrescu gave him a hard look. "Because people lock what they fear losing, or what they fear opening." The lieutenant turned to me. "You and Petrescu check the church doors and windows. Toma and I will cover the square. Iancu stays with Dumitru at the well. No one pulls that bucket again." I nodded and moved with Petrescu toward the church. The building was small, whitewashed, with a roof of dark shingles slick from rain. The windows were narrow and set high. A faded painting of a saint sat above the main door, the face worn by weather. Petrescu tested the padlock with his hand. It held. He examined the latch and the wood around it. "Fresh nails," he murmured. "Someone reinforced it." "Maybe to keep thieves out," I said, though it sounded weak even as it left my mouth. Petrescu didn't answer. He walked along the side wall and found a narrow window with iron bars. He pressed his face close and tried to see inside. After a moment, he stepped back. Dark, he said, but I can smell it. Same smell as the well. My throat tightened. From inside the church? He nodded once. Yes. Behind us, the lieutenant called out again, this time to the square. Villagers of Valea Saica, by order of the prefect, you will come out. We will not leave until we know what has happened. A door creaked somewhere, but it did not open. Petrescu moved to the back of the church, where a small side door led to what would have been storage. That door had been nailed shut with 2 planks crossing it. The nails were driven deep. They prepared, he said. This was not panic for one night. I tried the planks with my hand. They didn't move. We could break it, I said. Petrescu looked at the lieutenant, then back to me, not without cause and not without control. We returned toward the square. Dumitru was still near the well, cloth over his mouth, while Iancu stood stiffly, eyes wide. Toma and the lieutenant had shifted so their backs were near the wellstone, giving them cover. The lieutenant spoke quietly. What did you find? Petrescu answered. Reinforced doors. Smell inside. Someone sealed it. The lieutenant's face tightened. Then we need a witness. He turned toward the houses again. I will give you 5 minutes to come out, he said. If you do not, we will enter homes to check for the sick and the dead. That last word carried across the square. A shutter snapped closed. Then, from the same house as before, a figure stepped into the doorway. It was a boy, maybe 10 or 11, barefoot on the wet ground. He wore a thin shirt that hung loose and a wool vest too large for him. His hair was cut short and clung in damp spikes to his forehead. His eyes looked too alert for a child who had been hiding. He stared at us, then at the rifles, then at Dumitru's satchel. The lieutenant kept his hands visible and low. Come here, he said gently. We won't hurt you. What is your name? The boy swallowed. His throat moved hard. Mihai, he said. Where are your parents, Mihai? Dumitru asked, his voice steady. The boy's gaze flicked to the church. They are in the houses, he said. In which house? He said. In which house? The lieutenant asked. Mihai shook his head once. In the church. Petrescu's face didn't change, but I saw his grip tighten on his rifle. The lieutenant spoke carefully. Why are they in the church? Mihai looked down at his feet, then up again. His lips trembled, but his voice stayed controlled as if he had repeated these words many times in his head. Because they died, he said. A silence followed that felt heavy. Even the horses behind us stopped shifting. Dumitru asked the next question without delay. How did they die? Mihai's eyes darted to the windows again. They got up after, he said. Iancu made a short sound that he cut off immediately. The lieutenant kept his voice level. Tell me exactly what you saw. Mihai took one step forward, then stopped as if an invisible line held him back. They were sick first, he said. Then they were still. Then the old women said to bring them to the church because the ground was hard, and the priest said not to dig until after the frost breaks. They put them inside. They prayed. They locked it. Then at night there were sounds, like hands on wood, like people pushing. Dumitru's eyes narrowed. And the priest, Mihai's voice dropped. He went inside to pray over them. He did not come out. The lieutenant glanced at Petrescu. Petrescu's jaw tightened. And the well? I asked before I could stop myself. Mihai looked at me, and in that moment he seemed older than his years. They told us not to drink, he said, but people drank anyway. The water tastes wrong. Then they get hot. Then they sweat and shake. Then they stop. Then later, they move. Petrescu stepped closer, careful not to startle the boy. Who is they? Mihai's shoulders rose slightly, then fell. The ones who are still alive. There are not many. We stay inside. We nail doors. We don't light fires. We don't make noise. Why not? The lieutenant asked. Mihai's eyes went to the church again. Because when the sounds stop in the church, he said, the sounds start at the doors. The lieutenant did not speak right away. He took a breath, slow and controlled. Mihai, he said, how many people are still alive? The boy thought for a moment. I know of 9, he said, maybe 10. Some do not answer when we knock on the walls. Petrescu asked, walls? Mihai nodded. We knock so we don't open doors. We listen for knocks back. Dumitru closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Have any of the living been bitten or hurt by the dead? Mihai shook his head. No. They push. They hit. They stand. They wait. A low sound came from the church. It was not loud, but it carried wood scraping against wood. A slow thump followed, then another. It was measured, not frantic. Iancu's face drained of color. That is from inside, he said. The lieutenant raised his hand. No one fires, he said. No one moves unless I say. The sound stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Petrescu spoke quietly to the lieutenant. We cannot leave the church sealed with whatever is inside. If the living are barricaded, they will not last. And if what he says is true, we need to see it ourselves. The lieutenant nodded once. We open it under control. Dumitru, you stay back and watch the well. Toma covers the square. Iancu stays with me. You and I, Petrescu. Mihai took a step back. Don't open it, he said. They hear the nails. The lieutenant looked at him. If we don't, more people will die, he said. Stay with Dumitru. Do not move. Mihai hesitated, then went to Dumitru's side and pressed close to him, gripping the edge of the satchel. Petrescu and I returned to the church door. The padlock gleamed. Petrescu produced a small pry bar from the cart and wedged it carefully into the latch. He tested the wood around it. Stand to the side, he said to me. I stepped back and angled myself so I could see without being directly in front. The lieutenant and Iancu took positions a few paces behind us, rifles ready but low. Petrescu applied pressure slowly. The wood creaked. Inside, something thudded against the door from the other side, not once, but twice. Then again, as if responding. Petrescu paused. His face remained set. On 3, he said. 1. Another thud from inside, closer to the latch. 2. I felt my pulse in my ears. 3. The door swung inward a hand's breadth and stopped against something solid. The smell rushed out, thick and warm despite the cold air. It made my eyes water. Petrescu shoved again. The door opened wider and what had been pressed against it slid forward and collapsed onto the threshold. It was a man. His clothes were those of a farmer. His face was gray and drawn. His eyes were open but unfocused. His mouth hung open, lips cracked. There was no breath. His skin looked wrong, stretched, then his fingers twitched. I heard Iancu suck in air sharply behind me. The man's arms dragged weakly against the stone. His head rolled to one side. His jaw moved, teeth clicking once. Hold, the lieutenant said, his voice tight. The man did not rise. He did not reach. He lay there and moved in small, broken motions, like a body remembering something it could not finish. Petrescu knelt just enough to see the man's chest. No breathing, he said. No pulse. The man's hand closed around the edge of the doorframe. The sound of movement came from deeper inside the church, more than one source. Feet dragging, bodies shifting. A low noise followed. Not a voice, not a groan, but air moving through damaged throats. The lieutenant made a decision. Petrescu, he said. End it. Petrescu did not hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired once into the man's head at close range. The sound was sharp and deafening in the small square. The body went still. Inside the church, the sounds changed. They became faster, louder, multiple impacts against wood and stone. "Back," the lieutenant said. "Close it." Petrescu and I pushed the door shut together. Something struck it from inside with force enough to jar my arms. We slammed the door and braced it while the lieutenant drove a wedge back into place with the butt of his rifle. Another blow from inside shook the hinges. "Get the planks," Petrescu said. Tama ran from the square with 2 of the nailed planks ripped free from the side door earlier. We crossed them over the main door and hammered them in with stones, working fast. Each strike from inside came closer to the latch, as if whatever was there learned where to push. When the planks held, the sounds continued, but duller. We stepped back, breathing hard. The square felt smaller now, boxed in by watching houses. The lieutenant wiped his face with his sleeve. "Everyone listen," he said. "This is no sickness, we know. The well may be poisoned or fouled, the dead are not resting. We secure the living and get them out." "And the church?" I asked. "We contain it," he said. "We do not open it again." A shout came from a house on the far side of the square, a woman's voice raw with fear. "They're at the door." The lieutenant spun. "Which house?" A shutter flew open and a hand waved frantically. "Here, please." Toma and I moved at once. The lieutenant followed with Iancu. Petrescu stayed near the church, watching the planks. We reached the house. The door shook under repeated impacts from the outside. From inside, someone sobbed. Toma braced his shoulder against the doorframe and pressed inward while I pulled nails free from a board lying nearby. "Open!" I shouted. "Now!" The door opened inward just enough for us to slip through. Inside were 3 people, an older woman clutching a rosary, a man with a bandaged arm, and a girl about 16 holding a kitchen knife with both hands. The impact stopped as soon as the door opened. I slammed it shut behind us and dropped the plank into place, driving nails through with the butt of my rifle. "What is out there?" the girl demanded, her voice shaking but steady enough to surprise me. "Later," the lieutenant said as he entered. "How many here?" "3, the man said. Sweat ran down his face despite the cold. "They come at night. They stand until morning." "Any injured?" Dumitru asked, appearing at the doorway with Mihai close behind him. The man lifted his bandaged arm. "I cut myself boarding the door, that's all." Dumitru checked it quickly. "Keep it clean," he said. "No water from the well." A thud hit the outer wall, then another farther away. "They're moving," Toma said. Petrescu's voice came from outside. "Lieutenant, the church is loud and there's movement between houses." The lieutenant looked at the 3 villagers. "You will leave now," he said. "Take nothing but coats. We are going to the road." The older woman shook her head. "They follow," she said. "They don't stop." "They will," the lieutenant said, "because we will not stop." We moved fast. House to house we gathered the living. Some resisted, clinging to walls and furniture. Some came willingly, eyes empty with exhaustion. Knocks echoed from inside walls as people signaled each other to move. Not all answered. By the time we reached the edge of the village, we had 8 villagers with us, plus Mihai. The sounds from the church had become constant, a dull hammering that carried even as we put distance between us and it. As we reached the trees, a figure stepped out from behind a shed near the last house. It was another man, like the first. He stood upright, swaying slightly. His clothes were torn, his face was slack, and his eyes were fixed on us without focus. Then another stepped out behind him, and another. They did not run. They walked slow and steady, spreading to block the path. The lieutenant raised his rifle. "This is it," he said, no hesitation. I tightened my grip and aimed, knowing that if we failed here, there would be no second chance. The first shot came from Toma. He aimed carefully and fired once. The man in front dropped straight down, legs folding without resistance. The others did not react. They kept walking. I fired next, aiming for the head as Petrescu had done. The second figure fell backward, hit the ground, and lay still. The third stumbled when the body struck his legs but did not stop. He adjusted his balance and kept moving. "Keep distance," the lieutenant said. "One shot each. Make it count." The villagers huddled behind us, pressed close together. I heard someone praying under their breath. Mihai stood rigid, eyes fixed forward, his hands clenched at his sides. Two more figures emerged from between houses, then another from the direction of the fields. They were spreading, not rushing, but the effect was worse. They were cutting off space. Petrescu stepped up beside me and fired twice in quick succession. Both figures dropped. He moved his feet, keeping a clear line of sight, his face focused and calm. Iancu hesitated. I saw it in his shoulders. He raised his rifle, lowered it, then raised it again. The figure in front of him came within 10 paces. "Now," the lieutenant said sharply. Iancu fired. The shot went wide and struck the shoulder. The figure turned slightly as if pulled by the impact, then continued forward. "Again," Petrescu said. Iancu fired again. This time the figure fell. More movement came from the village edge, at least a dozen now, maybe more. Some dragged one foot, some held their arms stiffly at their sides. None spoke. We began to move backward as a unit, step by step toward the trees. The horses were tied near the track, already restless. One stamped and pulled against the rope. "Don't bunch," the lieutenant said. "Leave space to shoot." A figure came too close on the left. I fired and missed. Petrescu fired immediately after and dropped it. I felt heat rise in my face, not from exertion but from fear at my own mistake. Dumitru stayed behind the line, keeping the villagers moving, pushing shoulders when they froze. "Keep going," he said. "Don't look back." A woman stumbled and fell. I grabbed her arm and pulled her up. Her sleeve tore, but she did not cry out. Her eyes stayed forward. Another shot rang out, then another. The sound echoed through the trees and came back wrong, stretched and thin. When we reached the horses, the path narrowed. The lieutenant looked at the cart, then at the line of figures still coming. "Cut the ropes," he said. "We go on foot." Petrescu slashed the ties. The horses bolted into the trees, dragging the cart a short distance before it tipped and stuck between two trunks. We left it. We pushed into the forest. The ground dipped and rose. Branches snagged coats. The villagers struggled to keep up. The sounds behind us did not change. No running, no shouting, just steady movement. After several minutes, the trees thickened and the path split. The lieutenant chose left without slowing. We followed. The figures behind us began to thin, spread out by the terrain. That helped. We stopped briefly at a narrow ravine where the ground dropped steeply. "Hold here," the lieutenant said. "We finished this." We took positions along the edge. The first figure appeared between the trees, then another. They approached the ravine without hesitation. The first stepped forward and fell, tumbling down the slope. The second followed. We fired until the movement stopped. The forest went quiet again, except for our breathing and the soft sounds of the villagers weeping without sound. The lieutenant waited a full minute before lowering his rifle. "Count," he said. Petrescu scanned the trees, none moving. We did not linger. We moved until the forest thinned and the ground leveled. By late afternoon, we reached the road. No one followed. We reached the outskirts of the nearest town after dark. Lamps were lit. Dogs barked. People shouted when they saw us emerge from the trees with a group of villagers. The lieutenant reported directly to the local prefect that night. Guards were posted on the road to Valea Sequa before dawn. No one was allowed to enter. 2 days later, a larger unit arrived with doctors from the city. They burned the well. They burned the church with everything inside it. They burned 3 houses where no one had answered the knocks. The villagers were quarantined. Some fell sick anyway, some did not. Mihai stayed alive. He did not speak much after. I was questioned twice and told to write a report that avoided certain words. I did as ordered. Valea Seca does not appear on newer maps. The road to it has been allowed to fade. People in the nearby town say the land there is poor and the water bad. I know what I saw. I know what we did. I still remember the sound from inside the church when the planks held and the door did not open.